Welcome back, everybody. This is our second episode of the week, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit today and talk about a bunch of different things. I'm going to wrap it up with what I'm going to call the twisted trophies of the Zodiac Killer, and you'll see what I mean when we get to that. Well, before I forget, I'd like to thank everybody for all your support and all your kind messages. It really means a lot to me. As usual, we're going to begin with a disclosure here. So I'm just going to read this for you. Let's see. Please allow me to begin with a legal disclaimer. All of the following information contained within this presentation should be taken as statements of opinion and not fact. This presentation is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any and all named individuals, organizations, orders, sects, religious organizations, and law enforcement groups are all presumed to be innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. None of this presentation nor any statement made herein is meant to harm, tarnish, nor defame the reputation of any person or entity mentioned herein. Each and every statement made has been gleaned from many thousands of hours of careful study of the Zodiac ciphers, most recently the Burger Chef cipher from September 27th of 2019. The following presentation is a summary of some of my findings as to precisely what it is that is hidden within the Burger Chef cipher. The cipher itself does not have a voice, but let me be that chosen one, the messenger, the truth teller. I am simply relaying to you, the listener, what the Burger Chef cipher has told me to be facts. Once again, all individuals, entities, organizations, etc., mentioned herein are to be presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. I am here to bring answers as to what the cipher tells us. What I'm about to share with you is a seemingly impossible tale of governmental corruption committed by the very elite in this extremely hypocritical, broken, sadistic, and very satanic society that we live in. Since at least 1963, the man who raised me, Dick Nolette, followed by his son, and now his son after him, have all served as state-sponsored agents of chaos. They've been given a free, quote-unquote, hall pass to commit each and every form of mayhem imaginable. They are responsible for everything from unaliving men, women, and children, countless human beings from one end of the country to the other, to bombings of international acclaim, bombings of airliners of international acclaim, the largest one being the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie. And they're responsible for many of the most infamous crimes committed throughout the entire United States from 1962 to the present. I will be the first to admit that a lot of what I'm about to say and share with you will seem to be entirely impossible, and my findings to be called quote-unquote delusional too. The ciphers are designed to make any person who tries to come forward and explain all of this to be either guilty themselves or at the very least to appear to be completely batshit crazy. This is the intent of the cipher and the people who put this cipher together. So with that in mind, let's move forward with another episode. Once again, great to see everybody. Thank you. I'm going to begin by going through the cipher a little bit, and there's things I want to point out. Just general things. We're not going to get into anything too deep to begin with, but I do want to point out that there are hidden messages and hidden words on each line of this cipher, and this cipher, once again, is a letter replacement cipher. And what that means is on each line, letters have been removed. That's one of the forms of hiding messages. It's called obfuscation, and there's many different techniques that they have used to great effect in creating this Burger Chef cipher. Once again, 4 individuals have created this, spanning 3 generations. 2 of the primary creators of this cipher are in their 80s now, have been lifelong serial killers, and began, well, for a large portion of their lives, they've been employed by various 3-letter organizations at the federal level. So the chances of holding anybody accountable in this whole debacle are pretty slim. But regardless, I'm moving forward with my presentations, and I need to get the truth out there to the world, so everybody can at least hear the truth and know the truth, even if nothing is ever done about it. Getting back to how the cipher works, one of the important aspects of the cipher is what is called letter replacement or letter substitution. Basically, like I said, letters have been omitted from each line, and a line goes from left to right. And the letters that have been omitted on each line correspond to the letter in the alphabet to that line. So the first line on the very top would correspond to numbers 1 and 20, which are letters A and T in the alphabet, because obviously it's the first and it's the 20th line from counting from bottom to top. It's number 20. So I'll just share with you all this is it's a sheet that shows how the numbers correspond to the letters in the alphabet. So let's see. All right. Just need to get a little more light on things, guys. All right. With that in mind, one thing I'd like to start with is these serial killers are also they're primarily satanic at heart. That's at the root of a lot of their sacrifice is its religious purposes, and it goes back to their satanic beliefs. And they've been sacrificing people. Well, Dick basically unalived his first victim when he himself was 12 years old, and the victim was 12 years old also. He and the family lured a 12-year-old boy. They basically fooled him into thinking he was going to help sell things door to door, and this happened in July of 1954 in the state of Maine. Anyhow, long story short, they ended up abducting the boy, binding him, torturing him, before finally murdering him. And they dumped his body in a river by Auburn, Lewiston, Maine. And you can read about that online. It's one of the oldest cold cases in the state of Maine. But moving forward, I wanted to talk about the cannibalistic side of them. This whole puzzle is based upon, on the surface, it's a cute little puzzle that's based upon the theme of Burger Chef, which was a restaurant in the 1970s. And what they've done is they've made it look like basically it looks like a puzzle that you might find to entertain kids, to keep kids occupied. Back in the 70s, they had a lot of things like that. You could either give your kids crayons or one of these little puzzles to keep them quiet and keep them occupied. But underneath all of this is something much more sinister, incredibly sinister, actually. what they're doing is they're mocking the fact that they have basically unalived more people than anybody ever has in the United States over the last, well, going back basically 70 years now. And once in a while, on special occasions, they do cannibalize some of their victims, and in large part, that's what the inside joke is about the Burger Chef Cipher, at least the ad that goes along with it, because when it was published online in September of 2019, it was published with this cute little ad, and I'll show it to you here. But what this is saying is it's an inside joke known only to them. And when it says "Open Wide America," they're flaunting everything they've done out in the wide open, and most people could never guess or would never guess that, like, even people this sinister even exist. But the truth is much darker than even this, because the truth is a lot of the elites at the very, very top, even above the highest politicians in this country, they practice this sort of thing. They are into, doing all kinds of horrible things to small children, and that also includes cannibalizing them. And they do that because they think that they get some sort of power from sadistically injuring children, and also from consuming their flesh. So when you see their cartoonish little photos, their cartoons there, and the message that says "Open Wide America," you never can forget what they're talking about is, if the truth ever were to come out, nobody ever would forget, because this is the biggest secret in American history, and this would be the biggest crime story in American history if it ever were to come out, and if the media and everybody else, including politicians, if everybody were to tell the truth, this would be the biggest crime story that ever occurred on American soil. So getting back to the cipher, the reason I shared all of this is one of the hidden messages that the cipher begins with. Well, on the surface, we obviously see it begins with the words "we kill," so that does not need to be explained. This is 3 generations of a serial killer family, and they're outright point blank saying, "This is what we do: we kill." Hidden in this message, though, the letters A and T are removed, and what the line actually begins with is the words "we tweak, we kill, we ate." So they're saying that they're sadistic, that they enjoy inflicting incredible pain upon their victims before they unalive them, but also after that is done, and after they have unalived a person. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't happen all the time, but on quote-unquote special occasions, they do enjoy eating the flesh, cannibalizing some of their victims. So that's what we're getting into here. As we move along the top line, there's many different meanings to this line. You'll see it says "we kill foreign," and this is supposed to say foreign nationals. Everything in this, well, not everything, but a high percentage of things in this Burger Chef cipher are spelled out phonetically, which means they're just spelled out in very simplified form. Incorrect spelling, it's just spelt out according to sound, a lot like a child might do. On the top line, this can be interpreted in many different ways. And throughout this whole puzzle, each character, let alone each message, can be interpreted in many different ways, and that's called polysemous, which is from the Greek meaning poly, and semous meaning meaning. So many meanings is what it means. And I'm going to demonstrate something on the first line here. It says, "We kill foreign national." What this represents in one situation, ATH in one situation represents at the house, but it takes on a different meaning in another situation. So foreign national can mean anything from one victim to 4 victims to, believe it or not, 270 victims on this first line. So what I'm going to tell you is the first victim it can represent is my best friend, Nestor Gillen, who was a foreign national. He was not an American citizen. He was a citizen of Mexico. So I'm not going to get into all the details, but letter 7 here is at the 7-1 position, and that equals his initial, and 71 was the year that he was born. It gets a lot more specific, but we're not going to go into too much specifics on each victim today. What I wanted to show, though, was he was the first victim selected in the Burger Chef Cipher to be murdered, and that happened in May of 2020. There were 6 specific targeted individuals in this Burger Chef Cipher, with Nancy Guthrie being the, I believe she was the third. She was either the second or third victim. And she was unalived on the 1st of February of this year in her own home in Tucson, Arizona. So the most recent one, that the person that this represents, is, like I said, my best friend, Nestor Gillen. After that, we go back to December of 1988. I believe it was December 20th or 21st, 20th, 21st, or 22nd, one of those dates. But 1988 was the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie. And that is heavily documented in this cipher. Right here, this foreign national leads into, this stands for Heathrow Gate 14. And this is position 1-4. Everything goes by position in this cipher. And position designates the birth date and death date of a lot of victims, but also the address in a lot of situations. And in this particular case, we have, once again, initials identifying the place, the location, which was Heathrow Gate 14. That was where, that was the last point. That was possibly where the bomb was loaded at, or it could have been earlier on another transfer flight. So according to this, though, it seems to indicate that Gate 14 is where the device was loaded onto Flight 103. Let's see. Yeah. Well, I was going to show the whole card of the plane, but I can't find it. Anyhow, in the very center of the cipher, this image here is hidden, and you can't see it. And it would take me 3 to 6 hours to explain the whole why it's hidden there. But it's hidden according to specific information about the plane and the various names given to the plane and important dates surrounding the bombing of Flight 103 over Lockerbie. But, and believe it or not, this is not the only bombing that's described in the Burger Chef Cipher. There was a second bombing that they took responsibility for, and that does not have a diagram of an airplane. I believe that the airplane suffices for, that suffices to say that they were into bombing airliners for a while. The one that is illustrated that I just showed you is for Pan Am Flight 103, but the second one that second bombing occurred the year after in November of 1989, and it was attributed. Sorry guys, I can't talk tonight. I'm going to keep pushing through it though, either way. The second bombing of an airliner was nearly a year later, and it was a South American plane that was attributed to a famous drug dealer. I don't know if his name was Pablo Escobar. I think I'm getting that right, but anyhow, the word Pablo in the cipher corresponds to the dates of the bombing of the bombing of the plane in South America, which is the second recorded incident in the Burger Chef cipher having to do with bombings of airliners. These lines here with the word Pablo align with the dates of that bombing of the one in South America, and you can see how it says blowhole right here, blowhole, and there's a lot of different words here related to bombs, bomb making, explosives, and anyhow, with the diagram of the plane I just showed you, this goes along with the bottom of the plane where the bomb was actually placed. So it says blowhole. So, all right, enough of that. Maybe I'll do a detailed episode at some point in the future, specifically on the bombings of Flight 103 over Lockerbie and the Avianca, I believe it was called, the one that happened in November of 1989 in South America. I think it was Colombia. Going back to the top line, we're going to finish with one more translation of this. And what that goes back to, the crime that I'm going to mention right now, is in April, I believe it was April 10th and 11th of 1981, something horrible occurred in a tiny little town in Plumas County, California. And what that was, it became known as the Cabin 28 massacre in Keddie, California. And in that whole incident, a family, 3 members of the family and their teenage family friend were all murdered in that cabin. And the whole purpose of that was to obtain possession of their young daughter, whose name was Tina Sharp. And in this first line, it's been very carefully hidden, but what they're saying is that they killed 4 people in order to get to Tina Sharp, 4 people, including Tina Sharp herself. So basically, all of the other, Tina's mother, her brother, and her brother's best friend were all quote-unquote collateral damage in the attack inside Keddie Cabin 28. And I know for sure that the man who raised me, Dick Nolette, was the primary person responsible for that. And I believe his close relative, who lives in the southern part of the United States, was the person who assisted him. It was a very brutal scene, and it was done very quickly. And it's highly unlikely that one single person would have been able to do that single-handedly. So it is explained in detail in something called the Scorpion Cipher, which I've spent many, many hours working on, probably over 12,000 hours just on that one cipher. I've been working on deciphering these ciphers for 4 years now and have spent more or less about 20,000 hours in total on all of these ciphers, including over 4,000 hours on the Burger Chef cipher. But getting back to the first line and how it relates to Keddie, California, and the massacre that occurred there, you have to remember that the letters T and A are removed from this first line. So what they're saying here in that context is, well, first of all, the letter H stands for house, and whether it be the house of Heather Lane, where my best friend was murdered in 2020, May of 2020, or the house in Keddie, California. In many instances, ATH represents at the house. Basically, in all instances other than Heathrow Gate 14 with the airliner. So once again, the fourth position over represents the fourth month. So letter H represents April, but it also represents house. When we read this out, if we insert the T in between R and I, we get "we kill for Tina at the house," and ASI is the Latin form for jackass. And then it says, if we insert a T here and then another T at the end, it says "that's it." So just remember, like in cartoons, the old cartoons where I don't know if it was Porky Pig or one of those characters. I think it was Porky Pig, but he says that's all, folks, and that's how it ends. It always would end with him stuttering and saying, "That's all, folks." Anyhow, I believe that is probably what that is supposed to mean, and it also says, "That's it, jackass." But once again, I want to point out that what they're saying here is "we kill for Tina at the house." This represents the number 4. Just picture a number 4, because in total, 4 people were murdered, and the whole goal of the thing, these are pedophile. They have a major interest in doing harm to children, whether it be abducting them and torturing them, or things of a horrible sexual nature. And all of those were intended to be inflicted upon 12-year-old Tina Sharp. And the first thing that they knew they had to do was eliminate all of the people in between themselves and 12-year-old Tina Sharp. And that's what was done, and that was one of their most mysterious and infamous crimes, and one of the ones that they take a lot of pride in. And that's why that's one of the reasons it's hidden on the first line. So after they were able to unalive Tina's brother and mother and the brother's best friend in the cabin, they very likely absconded with Tina into the darkness, took her to a place near a place called Feather Falls, which is about 63 miles away. 63 once again relates to the number 36, which goes back to the number 666. All of these numbers have to do with it's basically a corresponding. The letters correspond to numbers, and the numbers have magical purposes in their beliefs. So all of it goes back to I don't know if I'm getting the word right, but gemancy, or no, I'm not getting the word right. Sorry about that, guys. But it goes back to the old Hebrew belief that a lot of biblical scholars ascribe magical purposes and meanings to various things and passages in the Bible according to the number of the passage. And in the world of Satanism, a similar thing is true. I can't find the sheet right now. There is a specific word that sorry guys, I just have too much things going on here and too much paperwork. But once again, the place that they took Tina to, what's important to know is not the name of the term, but that locations are very important, distances are very important, and it all boils down to quote unquote magic and its relation to numbers, location, times, dates, anniversaries, and on and on and on. If we go back to the case of Nancy Guthrie, one of the reasons that they disposed of her body in Rose Canyon Lake was that it was 36.6 miles from Nancy's front door. And once again, numbers and distances are very, very important to their religious beliefs. And that was one of the reasons that her body was taken to Rose Canyon Lake, among many other reasons. Another of the reasons being that the sheriff is said to have been somehow involved with this organization, and the lake nobody can swim or enter the lake. It has a very strict rule as far as no human contact with the lake water. And the sheriff is the person that enforces that, and all of his employees under him. So, but once again, before I get too sidetracked, one of the main reasons, it goes back to numbers. 36.6 miles from Nancy's front door to Rose Canyon Lake. And in their religious beliefs, everything goes back to numbers have incredible importance and significance. So you just need to remember that. The next thing we're going to go to, this is just going to be a little bit of bouncing around today before I end with the quote-unquote trophies of the Zodiac Killer. I don't know how long I'm going to go on this presentation. We'll just see, but a couple of my next presentations will be more focused, and they'll have to do with, well, hopefully this month I get them both done, but I want to do a presentation on how JonBenet Ramsey's unaliving was directly related to the assassination of JFK, believe it or not. And that's probably going to take me at least a 2-hour presentation. It's going to trace everything from basically ciphers from Z408 from 1969 all the way to the Scorpion cipher from 1998. And then finally with the Burger Chef cipher, which was published on September 27th of 2019 on the 50th anniversary of Zodiac's attack on the shores of Lake Berryessa, which happened by the oak trees. Those oak trees no longer exist, but Zodiac and his family are still out there doing their thing now. So yeah, one of the presentations will focus on that. And the other presentation will focus on the whole idea that Nancy was quote unquote buried with nature or buried in nature. There's conflicting reports on exactly which word was the connector word, but I'm going to show some of that in today's presentation here. But it's going to be, I'm going to do a specific presentation on the whole concept of buried in nature. Just that one itself in the future, either in the next week or the week after this week, one of the two. One thing I want to draw everybody's attention to at this point is the top left corner. Once again, we have we, which indicates that it's more than one individual. Nobody in the world could ever commit all of the crimes that are mentioned in this cipher. Let alone even the crime of murdering Nancy Guthrie. She weighed 150 pounds, and I don't know if anybody has ever tried to carry 150 pounds of dead weight, but it's something that very few people could do for any kind of distance. That's why I believe there were 3 to 4 individuals who planned the attack and carried out the attack on Nancy Guthrie. But let's move forward. I want to talk about other things. We can return to Nancy Guthrie. Like I said, the presentation about buried in nature will focus primarily on Nancy Guthrie. So today's presentation is going to be about many different victims. The next one I'm going to talk about is JonBenet Ramsey. And JonBenet Ramsey her whole line, the primary line that she has spoken about is line 4 up from the bottom up down here. And basically what it spells out is it begins with killed at house, and then they call her the hot tart is the description for her. But also this goes into art, spells out art tool. And what art tool is the ligature that was used to murder JonBenet Ramsey was one of her mother's paintbrush handles, and that's what art tool means. And as we move along here, the OOs align with the birth year of Patsy Ramsey, which is 56, and they're saying basically they accomplished one of their goals. 00 means she's no longer with us. She died of cancer before she turned 50 years old, and that was one of their intentions, was to inflict as much pain and damage upon the Ramsey family as possible. So they're saying that they did that. She's gone now. 00 means the mission's been accomplished as far as Patsy Ramsey, and she's dead. The T here, basically, JonBenet's father was born on 1943, December 7th of 1943. These letters over to the right here are saying that basically they indicate JonBenet's father, John. And the word net, in my mind, has a lot to do with the whole idea that a lot of people still believe that the family was involved, especially the father, John. So they've controlled the narrative from the very beginning, and now 30 years later, they still in large part continue to control it, and it still continues to cause a lot of pain and trauma for the family, not just John the father, but even the brother Burke, who was accused of doing something horrible to his sister when in fact he never had anything at all to do with it. So we'll get into it more in a future presentation, but just know that line 4 up, it's placed there for many different reasons, but once again, to the right side here is represents the father, JonBenet's father, John, and it also ties to the 4th line down from the top, and in as far as it connects what was done to JonBenet Ramsey to the Dallas deal. There was promises made for when the man who raised me shot JFK. They promised him untold riches, and then they absconded and never came through with the financial commitments that they had made to him. So in the Burger Chef cipher, he spells it out very clearly that all of the murders and things that have been done to everything from Nancy Guthrie to small children has been a part of the quote-unquote toll. And I've shared this in the past, but toll is spelled out many, many different ways in the cipher. And right here we see these 3 T's represent 35. They represent the killing of the 35th president, and it's tied to the word wallet. And it continues down here to spell the word TOAL, which is supposed to represent the word TOLL, which is toll. And what they're saying, this in another instance, this completes the spelling of the last name Nolette, Nolettete. It's completed with that E there, which is at the 2-1 position and represents the murder date of Nancy Guthrie. But what you need to know is underneath all of this, with letter replacement according to different positions, the word Hannibal Lecter, last name is Lecter, is spelled here as well. What they're saying is because of the promises that were never kept for being the trigger man for JFK, That's the reason that all of these murders have been committed, including John Benet Ramsey. So before I lose my train of thought here, on this line, the fourth line up, we replace with the letters Q and D, so that the E in the word net here becomes QED. So in the world of mathematics and logic, the abbreviation QED means thus it follows, or therefore it has been proven. And so what they're saying is this whole cipher works as above, so below. So the upper line 4 works with the lower line 4. And what they're saying here is QED is put in the middle of the whole John Benet abbreviation for John Benet, because they're saying John Benet, her murder only occurred as payback for not being paid for unaliving the 35th president, which was JFK. I know that sounds really incredulous and unlikely, but this is the case. This is the biggest conspiracy and secret in probably in the whole history of the United States. And what has happened is my family of origin have been given a quote-unquote free hall pass. They've been allowed to kill, just completely carte blanche to do any kind of harm, inflict any kind of harm or mayhem upon anybody in the whole entire United States, as long as they keep it down low, as long as they don't make it obvious. And in addition to that, a lot of the agencies, from the three-letter organizations at the top all the way down to the local agencies, have aided and abetted them, and actually have helped to frame a lot of innocent men in the whole process, including Willie the woodcutter from Napa, who died behind bars for a crime he had never committed, and including Boston's Leonard Paradiso, who also died behind bars for a crime he did not commit. In actuality, not only did Dick Nolette commit that crime, but he also fabricated the letter from the so-called informant letter from a person who was serving a long sentence already. His name was Robert Bond, I believe. I could be getting that wrong. I think I'm getting it right. Anyhow, all of that was fabricated. It was actually handwritten by Dick Nolette himself, and it resulted in Leonard Paradiso spending the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s in prison before he finally passed away behind bars, once again for a crime he had absolutely nothing to do with. But I am getting off topic here. I did want to point out, though, that QED here in line 4 up corresponds to the Dallas deal on line 4 down. And if we insert D over on the left-hand side here, the DAL combines with the AS on the other side. So DALL and AS spells Dallas, and that's deal. And all of these letters spell out messages, but more importantly, the important letters correspond with the birth date and death date of JFK, who was the 35th president of the United States. This word up here, because we insert a C on the third line down, this whole thing here becomes Camelot, and it's talking about the fall of Camelot on these lines. But it's also included one of Zodiac's favorite passages from the play The Mikado, which was the line Tit Willow. So it says Tit Willow right here, and that combines with the word Camelot. Before I forget, I wanted to, this is the John Benet Ramsey letter, and as you can see, it's signed SBTC on the lower right, and this was handwritten by Dick Nolette, by the way, and Dick Nolette has a special skill for, he can write in possibly hundreds of different scripts as far as changing his handwriting. One thing he really, I was trained on how to do my handwriting and my printing by the same person that trained Dick and my brother Mike. So we all have similar handwriting, but what's really unique about Dick's handwriting is the spacing between the words. And all I'm saying is there's nobody in the world, no so-called handwriting expert would be able to identify Dick's handwriting better than myself. And I'm 120% sure that this is handwritten by Dick. Like I said, the same person, my grandmother Ruth, taught all of us our handwriting. So one thing I want to point out here, though, is it begins with the lines, we are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. So carry over to this. In the cipher, it says we kill, but down the left-hand side, remember this is the left-hand path, and a lot of the clues are hidden in the form of an L, a letter L. Such is the case right here. It says we kill. Okay, it identifies a group of killers, not one, but a group. Obviously, we kill. Going down the left-hand side is the second part of our clue. Once again, all of this is in the shape of an L. Okay, an L in this case going to the left. Once again, the left-hand path is the term for these churches of satanic belief. We, SB, in both the JonBenet Ramsey letter and in the cipher here, they're identifying themselves as SB. Satanic Brotherhood is, I believe, what it stands for. I could be wrong about that, but I'm 99% sure that's what it stands for. So SB, Satanic Brotherhood. So I'm just pointing out the similarities between this and this is the Burger Chef cipher, and the letter that I was just showing you was written in about it was written at the time of JonBenet's murder, which was on December 26th of 1996. And once again, that was a satanic sacrifice, which is heavily detailed in something called the Scorpion Cipher. It's actually at the top and center of the Scorpion Cipher. And in this particular cipher, the Burger Chef cipher, before I forget to mention it, the L's on the lower portion down here also represent J's. So just picture this represents JonBenet. They can represent L's such that this also identifies the location of where JonBenet's body was found. It was found, her body was found wrapped in a blanket in the basement. LL in one instance represents the lower level of the house. So lower level equals the basement. Hopefully you guys can see all that. And one thing I want to mention before I forget is JonBenet's unaliving happened on the 26th of December of 1996. And she was age 6. So once again, all of these numbers, any alignment of 3 6s is especially auspicious to this group. All of these people belong to a satanic church called the Temple of Set, but they also it has been called the Order of 4 Pi. But one of the people involved in this whole organization, the official founder, was a person named Michael Aquino, who was a military specialist who specialized in military psychological warfare. And I'm just telling you, it takes an incredibly determined individual to be able to break this cipher and to most people I'm not bragging here, but it's just the way it is. Most people, very few people possess the level of patience that I do. And I don't know of any other person literally in the world. I'm sure they exist, but very few people would have spent 20,000 hours over 4 years deciphering these ciphers. But I just knew my family was hiding horrible, horrible secrets, and these ciphers have given me a lot of the truth and answered a lot of questions for me. And I'd like to share it with the world and get the truth out there, especially if something were to happen to me. I'd like to leave a record behind, even if my voice is. Today I'm nervous and I'm talking a little too fast, but I want to get a lot of information out there, and I don't have as I shared before, I don't have the best upload situation as far as computers go. So my connection is very slow. So I'm going to keep this under 2 hours today. I want to start shortening the length of some of these videos, because I myself like short videos. I like half-hour to an hour videos, but this information, there's so much information, and I feel the need to share as much of it with you as I possibly can. So once again, line 4 up describes JonBenet Ramsey being killed at her house. It does describe her. She was a beauty queen, and it describes her as killed at house. It describes her as a hot tart, which also has sexual, inferences, I guess you would say. And it shows TT is represents that she was targeted, and her family was targeted. Once again, the OOs are position 5 and 6 represent the birth year of Patsy, JonBenet's mother, who her illness, she regressed in her illness and succumbed before the age of 50, and a lot of it probably had to do with stress from losing the person most important in her life, which was JonBenet Ramsey, her daughter. Once again, these letters represent the location, lower level of the house, but also represent letter J's to represent JonBenet's name and also her father's name. But where was I going with that? There was one other thing. And once again, the positioning 4-3 is the birth year of JonBenet's father, John. That corresponds to letter N here, and N begins the word net. And basically, my family of origin enjoy fooling somebody into setting them up for being murdered, using a ruse. But they also they derive immense pleasure from pinning any of their crimes upon innocent men. And they've done that many, many times throughout the past decades. And in large part, there's many, many people that still believe that the Ramsey family had something to do with what happened to JonBenet Ramsey. And a lot of people are still pointing their finger at the father, John, even though he's been repeatedly vindicated and cleared of any involvement in his daughter's murder. So, all right. So moving on from that, I think we're going to, let's see. I think we'll talk about Lake Boreas, or actually, let's see. We're going to talk about Dick's relationship with women a little bit, not in the detail, because that's a whole episode in itself. Dick was raised by a woman who played a lot of psychological games upon him and affected him immensely in a lot of ways, probably not even known to him. He's in his 85th year now, and I truly believe that he probably is not even aware of the damage that his own mother inflicted upon him. But I think he had I don't want to talk about it too much today, but let me say I think that he had a Madonna whore concept for his mother. On one hand, I believe that internally, on some level, that maybe he didn't even want to recognize. I think he felt like his mom was his enemy and was a quote-unquote whore. and he hated her, but he could never admit that to himself or express it like consciously. But on another level, his mother was like a saint, like an angel. Uh, some people call it the Madonna whore concept in psychology. They call it that. But long story short, I believe his internalized hatred that he could never face about his mother was one of the main, probably the main reason that he began murdering women. And long story short, he was the responsible party for most or all of the murders that is classified as the Boston Strangler. Even though in that case, some crazy man that wanted attention admitted to things that he did not do, was sentenced to life in prison, and was mysteriously murdered behind bars himself. So whenever the story, whenever the person dies, the story dies, or their side of the story dies, and as they say, the victor always writes the story. So I think that I forget his name, but the man who falsely admitted to being the Boston Strangler, I believe they needed him. I believe he was trying to change his story at the time, and they needed him and his story to be silenced, and obviously that's what happened. But moving forward, after 1963, Dick and his family moved to California and began a new life. And Dick's mother and father bought a little house on Pacific Street in Napa. And in large part, that's where I spent a lot of the years of my childhood. Thankfully, Ruth was not entirely a monster, but she did have a lot of caring qualities to her. People are complicated, and she was no different. Anyhow, she was one of the few people in my life that I got any kind of quote unquote motherly care from. So I don't know. It was a mixed bag, is what I'm trying to say. There was abuse on one hand, and there was care on the other, and I guess the word trauma bond. A lot of this has to do with the word trauma bond too. Whether it be Dick, myself, or my brother Mike, there was no real pure love, no matter what generation of this family you look at or talk about. There were always conditions, and it was always hot and cold, and a lot of violence. And I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but moving on. This here is a scene from inside something called the Black House. And no, it's not the house I grew up in Napa, but you could call that the Black House as well. This is the Black House in San Francisco, and it was the headquarters of Anton LaVey, is the guy with the cape and the devil's horns here, doing a mock ritual on one of the female members of the organization, who's on the altar. But anyhow, there was a small older house, a small early 1900s house in San Francisco, and it became Anton LaVey's center of operations. And behind the scenes, there were a lot of important people in the founding of this church. And one of them happens to be this young man over to the left in the hooded. In the hood, the man wearing the hood is Dick Nolette, and ironically, he's holding the skull. He's the greatest serial killer in American history, and has taken more lives from men, women, and children in each category and all of the above than anyone would ever imagine, let alone believe. And I have a feeling I'm not going to be the one that proves him guilty, but I am trying to make a record of it and at least share my truth. And my truth is that this man has definitely unalived over 4 digits of human beings in this country. Whether that be 1,000 or 6,000, I have no idea, but somewhere in that ballpark. The reason I'm sharing this, though, is Dick is standing on the left with the skull in his hand, and the attractive brunette to the right of him, who is ringing a bell, I guess you would call it Satan's bell. She is Dick's first wife, basically, and her first name was Maureen. I better not use her last name, but she did pass away last year. She passed away, but she was from an area in New Jersey, near Hackensack, New Jersey. And the reason you need to know that is I'm going to point out something in the cipher to you, for you in a little bit. That's really very important and very telling. But what you need to know about this photo is it's not so much important about what's going on with Anton LaVey and the mock victim and all of that, but what's going on with the man in the hood and the attractive brunette to the right of him. This is Dick's first wife. She came from the East Coast shortly after Dick fell in love with her as they were teenagers. And Dick was quite a bit, Dick was quite a bit older than her, especially for young people. He would have been, I guess, in his 20s right here. It depends what year. I think this is about 1966. So Dick would have been 24, and his wife would have been just around 18 years old. But the problem with this whole situation is Dick went for a distant, cold woman. I think he had the same pattern as far as same pattern that I have followed in my life. I always used to try to date women who were, well, a lot of times out of my league, but also the cuter, more petite, and definitely I went for something that reminded me of my mother, which was, I don't know if I did it consciously, I think it was more unconsciously, but went for women that were very cold and obstinate. And just looking at this picture here and from the stories I've heard about Dick and his first wife, I believe she was very cold, very distant, and also she was not loyal to him. She ended up actually leaving Dick and going back and very quickly having a child with another man on the East Coast, and knowing a lot of Dick's psychological issues, whether it be sadism or his psychopathy, but I think there's a lot more to his issues, and one of them goes along with borderline personality disorder. And in that situation, the worst blow or worst infliction of injury that can occur to anyone that has borderline personality disorder is abandonment. And so at some point, either, I believe right after she graduated from Napa High School, she returned to the East Coast, and soon she was pregnant with another man's child and married him. And that Dick already had an incredible amount of rage towards women before this. He had already unalived over a dozen women at this point, and he was only in his early 20s, which is incredible. So after Maureen left him, that hatred only amplified, and I think he had made a promise to himself that that would never happen again. If any other woman tried to leave him after that, well, he would leave her in a way, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I think he would rather murder his girlfriend than be left, if that makes any sense to you. So after the situation with Maureen, if any partners, any of his female partners, inferred that they were on their way out or leaving, I believe that most of them were, in fact, murdered after Maureen. So she was very attractive, but like I said, probably very cold and obstinate, and she set the precedent as far as the amplification of Dick's hatred towards women. But it was already at a level 10 murder level. Like, this is a man who had already murdered over a dozen women, is what I'm trying to say. So you can't blame it on his mother. You can't blame it on this first wife of his, Maureen. But neither of those situations helped, is what I'm trying to say too. Like, we're all responsible for our own actions, but I just wonder if things might have been different if Dick had been raised by a different mother, and also maybe if he had made some different choices as far as the women that he pursued. But either way, maybe in the end, we're all responsible for our own actions. And like I said, I'm not blaming any of these women. Perhaps Dick was just born like an evil psychopath. I have no idea. I'm a kind of person that's always looking for answers, though, and I'm just talking out loud. So thank you, guys. Let's see. So what that's going to take us to is, unfortunately for her, let's see. The next woman I'm going to discuss had the bad luck of dating Dick after his divorce to Maureen, and most of you guys who know anything about the Zodiac already know who this woman is, but this is Darlene. Yeah, this is Darlene Ferrin. In the late 1960s, of probably 2 or 3 years after he divorced, after Maureen left him and headed back to the East Coast, Dick started dating this woman in Vallejo. And before I forget to mention it too, at position 4 down and position 4 up on the equal but opposite left-hand corner is the word hacksack. Down here, we spell from right to left. This spells H-A-K, and this spells S-A-K. And this all ties into the, geographically, it ties into the murder of Nancy Guthrie, who was murdered and dismembered in her own home after being sexually assaulted for a number of hours by members of my family of origin. This also is supposed to represent Dick's hatred towards all women, okay? And also probably his son's equal hatred towards all women. But right here is the word for sack. This is supposed to be S-A-C-K, but once again, everything is phonetically spelled in this puzzle. This represents the coordinates to Rose Canyon Lake, which is where Nancy Guthrie's body was taken. But I've explained this in detail in other episodes, and I don't have time to do it today. But I did want to point out that this also represents Hackensack, New Jersey. With this being Hack and this being Sack, it also refers to Hackensack, New Jersey. And the importance for that is that several important women in Dick's life originate from the area of Hackensack, and within a 30 to 35 mile radius, all of these women fall in that same little tiny geographical circle. And I'll get to that in a little bit, but I did not want to move on without mentioning that, because we'll get back to that in a little bit. Sorry if I'm bouncing around today, guys, but that was the plan. This is not a focused one topic presentation. It's going to be about a lot of different things today. So once again, let me make sure I'm getting her right, her name right. Darlene Ferrin. So many victims, so many names to remember, but Darlene Ferrin was from Vallejo, and she was technically a married woman, but she was young and she liked the men, and she had multiple lovers, even though she was married. And one of those lovers was the man who raised me, Dick Nolette. And long story short, Dick is a very controlling, very possessive man, and also just a couple of 2 or 3 years before he dated Darlene, I mean, sorry. A few years before he dated Darlene, he had been basically dumped by a woman that he believed himself to be deeply in love with, and she had cheated on him. Not Darlene, but his previous wife, who once again was Maureen. She's standing here to the right of, or to his left, and to the right as we're looking at it. Anyhow, after Maureen left him in 1966, Dick became even more possessive and more controlling, and had even more of an abandonment issue, I would imagine. So, unfortunately, for Darlene's sake, she began dating Dick and was one of his lovers, even though she was already married. Like I said, she was only 22 years old and had a child, and was probably trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. But definitely loved the men too, though. And believe it or not, Darlene, she looks a lot like, she resembles my mother in a lot of different ways. And I find that to be really unusual and really weird. But I guess all of us have a certain type that we like, and Dick, it was really weird. The woman that he married after he murdered Darlene looked a lot like Darlene herself, with the reddish brown hair and the blue eyes. But the point I'm trying to get to, I'm not going to spend too much time on this tonight, is at some point Dick discovered that Darlene was not his girlfriend, that she was seeing other men. And one night on the 4th of July, I don't know if he there's a very good chance that he had planned it to coincide with the 4th of July, in order so that the gunshots would sound like fireworks, if that makes any sense to you guys. I think he partly timed the attack to coincide with the 4th of July, because most people would have thought it was just simple fireworks rather than gunfire when he did the attack at Blue Rock Springs, on the outskirts of Vallejo. But anyhow, in the attack, he didn't. It was said he didn't speak. He just walked up and began firing upon Darlene and Michael Majo, and with the primary focus being Darlene. But she was taken to Kaiser Hospital in Vallejo, where she succumbed to her injuries. But the point I want to make is this is the police report from the incident on the 4th of July, which technically they write as being the early on the 5th of July. I believe it actually occurred a little bit before midnight, but regardless, the thing I want to focus on, well, first of all, it says the motive was probably jealousy and revenge, and then says that the perpetrator walked up the car and said nothing, began firing the gun. Well, one of the main focuses of doing this presentation tonight is I was thinking of doing a very short presentation, and I still may, on just the quote-unquote twisted trophies of the Zodiac Killer. And this number here, the case number, is very important as far as when I'm going to discuss a couple of the trophies of the Zodiac. And this number is going to become very, very important because I'm not going to spend too long talking about it, but the whole idea of trophies, normally people think of something to remember, like a quote-unquote victory by, and we think of like, BMX race, you have a trophy, or, track and field, if you're throwing the discus like I used to, you have, a medal, you get first place, first, second, third, whatever. You have something to remind yourself of something you worked hard towards and finally accomplished. And anyhow, I guess there's some similarities to this, but I think the quote-unquote trophies of the Zodiac are much more sinister and much more sadistic in nature. And one thing you need to know about the numbers of the police report are, after the murder of Darlene Ferrin on the 4th of July of 1969, the so-called Summer of Love, which I find all of that to be extremely ironic, by the way. Dick Nolette, operating as the Zodiac, was not was one of the ones that sat out the Summer of Love. He had other ideas, so to speak. But the second murder of the Zodiac was the murder of Darlene Ferrin at Blue Rock Springs. And this came right after the double murder on Lake Herman Road of two teenagers, which occurred on the 20th of December of 1968. But no letter had been written, no ciphers had been created, nothing had been sent to the local media until shortly after the murder of Darlene Ferrin. And I believe that one of the big motivating factors in creating the persona of the Zodiac was in order to distance himself from the murder of his girlfriend, Darlene Ferrin. And he was highly successful in creating the whole persona of the Zodiac. And with the additional murders, the focus soon drifted from Darlene and was sort of spread out to the other victims and to the letter writing and to the ciphers. And I don't know. I just think he had a really good plan, and he really had a great follow through as far as the whole thing. But it was incredibly sinister. And once again, this murder of his girlfriend, Darlene Ferrin, I think it marked a big transition in Dick's dating style, and I think a lot of it was triggered by his abandonment by his first wife, Maureen, which occurred in 1966 or 1967. So you can see where the pattern began and how it escalated. And basically, I think he had come to an internal agreement with himself that if any woman were to try to leave him after his first wife, Maureen, left him, that would be her signing her own death warrant. As if we're just getting down to brass tacks, like that's what that would amount to. That's what that would have amounted to. And before I forget to mention it, in my own family of origin, it seemed like every week, sometimes multiple weeks, multiple days of the week, it would sound. My mother and father would fight we had multiple levels to the house, but I would be on the upper level, and they would be in the kitchen on the middle level, and so many times it sounded like the man who raised me was killing my mother, and I was just a little kid. I could not do a single thing. Anyhow, they went through this repeatedly for many, many years, and I did not know about any of Dick's secrets as far as being a serial killer or any of this. Now that I look back, I'm just amazed that he never actually murdered my mother growing up, because there were probably countless like times that he came very close to murdering her. So before I move on, I guess I needed to mention that. I don't know. I don't have any of this on cards or any of this planned today, guys. So sorry if it's rambling around and around, but I think I'm discussing important things. So long story short, our family home phone number, as long as I could remember, probably going back to the early 1970s in Napa, has always begun with a 2 and ended with 3146. So it's begun with 2 and ends with 3146. And even to this very day, I'm not doxing anybody because I'm not giving the full number, but a member of my family of origin still possesses this phone number. And it's my complete, deep belief that this is considered to be a highly important trophy in the family Nolette. And it's in a way, it's an inside joke about, they have a saying about when they're getting even with somebody, they say, I'm going to fix their ass. I will fix their ass. Anyhow, I'm sure that that's what he said about Darlene, and he probably is still saying it to this day, that he quote unquote fixed her ass by filling her with a magazine of 9mm Luger bullets. But his trophy afterwards was hand selecting this phone number as our home phone number, and this is the phone number that has carried over now for at least 55 years. So for 55 years, the number has begun with a 2 and ended with 3146, and that is a trophy of the Zodiac. And he likes things that are constantly reminding him that he quote unquote won, because in his book, he had huge hands, and he would always poke me in the forehead even when I was a tiny little kid, and he would say, I will win. And having the home phone number set at this number that almost exactly corresponds to the police report for the murder of his girlfriend, Darlene Ferrin, it's a constant reminder that he did win, and he's still getting away with it. And chances are no law enforcement or no court will ever hold him accountable for any of his crimes, including the murder of Darlene Ferrin. But once again, this is one of his trophies, the numbers and how they tie into the numbers of the family phone number in Napa, California. So let's see, where are we going to go? Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about and not a lot of time left, guys. So this event here, I'm just going to describe it really quickly for you guys. This event here was called The Witch's Sabbath. It was a little play they put on at a strip club in San Francisco called Gigi's. And in the audience, well, all these people are important. This is Anton Zander LaVey. He's the founder, the founder of the Church of Satan. Sitting to the right of him is the real muscle man, the actual behind-the-scenes founder of the Church of Satan, which is the man that raised me, Richard Dick Nolette Sr. This is him right here. Okay. And what's happening here is they're putting on a play, and the person coming out of the casket on the stage is supposed to be playing the role of a what do you call it, a vampire, and a female vampire. And this woman her name is Mary Catherine Nolette, and she is my mother. I guess you'd call her my late mother now, because I just got word that she passed away. But she is raising out of the casket, and they're doing a satanic play, and she is supposedly a vampire. And by the way, Dick was involved in creating this artwork for the Church of Satan as well. On the very left, you have the executioner's outfit. This executioner looks like he's 8 feet tall here, because he's next to my mother, who's only about 5 feet tall. But what's important here is the executioner's hat, and the executioner's hood was used by Dick right around this time frame. This would have been 1969. Right around this time frame. Well, this very week was right around Halloween of 1969. So it would have been this was either 1969 or 1970. 1970, of October of 1970, is when my biological father was murdered by these two people, these two monsters. The man who raised me, Dick Nolette, and my biological mother here, once again, Mary Catherine Nolette, and her original name was Foley. She was Irish. But what I want to say is the executioner's outfit was, this hood was borrowed by Dick, the man who raised me, before he attacked. He did his hooded attack at Lake Berryessa, and one of the only survivor, a man who became an attorney by the name of Brian Hartnell. He was almost 7 feet tall, and Dick at his very top was maybe 6 feet tall at the tallest. But what I'm saying is, Brian Hartnell, because he was so tall, he was able to look down, and he noticed that it was he described it as being sort of like a graduation, one of the hats that you wear for a graduation ceremony, and it had a flat spot on the top. And this is the same exact hood, the very same hood that was worn by Dick during his attack at Lake Berryessa at the oak trees. So that's what they would have seen coming at them. It's pretty terrifying, if you ask me. But and once again, that's my mother there, Mary Catherine, who, once again, she lured my biological father to his death on October 26th of 1970 at a place called Leviathan Mine. His name was Dr. Charles Hollingsworth. And this is the man who tortured my biological father to death and murdered him at Leviathan Mine. This is the man that I'm named after. This is Richard Dick Nolette Sr. So, moving on. On September 27th of 1969, the attack at Lake Berryessa resulted in this woman's death. She was viciously slaughtered with probably a bayonet. And the one thing I want to point out, without getting too graphic, is Dick has always been a sadist and a sexual sadist. And even though there was no sexual contact with this woman's name is Cecilia Shepard, by the way. Even though there was no sexual contact with her, there was he did physically tie her up and bind her tightly, and with rope, and he's always derived sexual pleasure from doing things like that. Long story short, I truly believe that he achieved orgasm when he was stabbing Cecilia Shepard to death on the shores of Lake Berryessa. And I believe that 100%. Sorry for being graphic, guys. That's the least graphic I can get. But Dick would take my brother and I to Lake Berryessa almost every week to go fishing, many, many times throughout the year, most years. And I never knew that as I was sitting in the little aluminum boat with him, I was sitting in the boat with the serial killer. But also, he would often drift into just a dream state, just a daze. And I'm quite convinced that he was recalling the day that he earned a place in infamy in the criminal lore in the United States. But also, I think he really enjoyed inflicting the pain and terror upon this woman, Cecilia Shepard, because he's always hated people that are Christian, and I believe he also despises people that have a high level of education, and of course women. So Cecilia fit the category for several different categories of people that Dick just automatically despises. So he unleashed an incredible amount of hatred and vitriol, and probably Cecilia received a lot of quote-unquote payback for going all the way back to Maureen leaving him and leaving that marriage in 1966. But let's see. All right. So one thing at a time. So the next thing we're going to discuss is the trophy. So whenever you do a good thing, or whenever you do a hard job and you've accomplished your goal, it's always good to have a marker of that. And in the case of the murder of Cecilia Shepard, believe it or not, guys, the trophy that Dick decided to award himself was in the purchase of a family home in Napa, California. And Dick, you have to understand, before the Zodiac's attack on Lake Berryessa of September 27th of 1969, the Zodiac was not really at the top of the list of national or international stories. It was only after his hooded attack at Lake Berryessa where he became the quote-unquote monster that he's become in American folklore. So anyhow, long story short, Dick was very proud of what he had done at Lake Berryessa and what he had gotten away with. And it ranked up there I'm sure in the top 10 things of crimes that he had committed at that time. Well, and that's saying a lot, because he has committed an unbelievable amount of crimes. So to be in his top 10, it had to be something horrific. Getting back to this, in the early 1970s, not too long after he had murdered Cecilia at Lake Berryessa, by the way, she was taken to the local hospital where I was born. It's called Queen of the Valley Hospital. And the yellow block right here is Queen of the Valley Hospital. And anyhow, they took Cecilia from Lake Berryessa to Queen of the Valley. And unfortunately, in the following days, Brian Hartnell got better, but Cecilia Shepard succumbed to her injuries. And this is where, right here is where they would have taken Cecilia into the front doors to the emergency room, I believe. Now I believe there's another alternative entrance back here. But way back in the day, I believe it was up in this front area. Long story short, in the early 1970s, not too long after his attack at Lake Berryessa, Dick bought this family home on Montclair Avenue, and it's the first house on the eastern side. Most of these are like apartment buildings, so it's either the first or one of the closest homes on the eastern side of the street. By the way, the eastern side has a lot of significance, importance to their religion, so I think he wanted to be on the eastern side of the street for that reason. But going back, he wanted to be as close to where they brought Cecilia Shepard in after his attack at Lake Berryessa as possible, because he wanted to look over at every day and see where his victim had died. And this is his trophy, is what I'm trying to say. So he purchased his home here on Montclair Avenue in the early 1970s, and he also got the phone number that begins with a 2 and ends in 3146. So these are two of his trophies, okay, and they were very important to him, because whenever the phone rang, that would remind him of the murder of Darlene Ferrin in Vallejo, a woman who had attempted to leave him and found out the hard way that was not going to happen with somebody like Dick. Sorry to be graphic, but that's just the way it is. Dick is a man who hates women and does not need a reason to murder a woman. And the same goes for children, by the way. So X marks the spot where the family home is, or approximate. Back in the 1970s, I grew up from the early 1970s until about 1978. This is where the family resided. And as a kid, or as a teenager, Dick was very athletic, and one of the things he did was throw the javelin. I believe he got second place in the state of Maine in the javelin. Well, either from the house or at the very least from the street corner here, Dick could have thrown a javelin, or with the greatest of ease, he could have thrown rocks at the front of the hospital here. And the only reason I'm pointing that out is, once again, this was definitely one of his quote-unquote trophies. He's a very sadistic and satanic man, and he wanted to be across from the Christian hospital where his Christian victim had died from her injuries that he had so deeply enjoyed inflicting upon her. And before I forget to point it out, you can also see that this forms a Z shape, and all of the locations and shapes and numbers are very important to this organization and to the satanic religion. And the Z shape has become very important to him. In the Burger Chef cipher itself, many of the most important hidden messages are hidden in the shape of a Z, either a Z or an L. And L is for left-hand path, and Z is for Zodiac. And so once again, I'll just explain it to you. This is the family home right in this area. Just a walk across the street, and you go to Queen of the Valley Hospital, the Christian church where I was born, and it has a great big sculpture of a huge golden sculpture of a Madonna on the outside, on the front facade right here. And anyhow, this is where Cecilia Shepard was taken, where she died, and where every morning when Dick went to work, he would head out this way, and he would probably say to himself, "F you, I won," and grin to himself for the whole trip to Mare Island Shipyard, where he would go off to work. And he was a rigger, general foreman. And once again, he liked killing with rope, and his job was working with rope. So he always had rope in his hands, either rope or a pen. He's a unusual combination. He's a highly educated autodidact, mostly self-taught, but he can write at the highest level. as high as like a professor level writer, but he's also the most gruesome, sadistic serial killer that America has ever had also. So he's outwardly, I don't know, I would say most people, if he wanted you to like him, he could definitely, you would walk away thinking, oh, that was a great guy, because he has a lot of charming qualities, and knows he has a lot of tools in his tool bag. And even though his charm is saccharine sweet charm, most people don't know the difference. And by the time you know the difference, most people have been murdered. Just boiling it right down to it. Most people think he's a nice guy until they've been murdered. So, but once again, this was going to just be part of my presentation. This is the trophies of the Zodiac, and this is the number 2 of 2 that I wanted to share today. The family home. Once again, he could have purchased thousands of different places throughout Napa. The one that he chose was where he could be closest to the victim that he murdered. Let's see. I'm going to go through the next one really quickly, because it's not going to be in depth, you guys, because I just noticed I'm fading a little bit, and also I'm going to do a whole specific presentation on this one in the coming weeks. In the early 1980s, I believe it was 1981, I could be wrong about the date, Dick began. What you have to understand is Dick was given lifetime airfare free of charge, and he was also basically a paid employee of one or two of the 3-letter organizations, and his life was set up to where outwardly he looked like an employee from Mare Island Shipyard, but he was also allowed a huge amount of free time, so he could go out and, well, basically do his thing, which is a hidden way of describing murdering people and torturing people. And he was able to do that all across the country, from Napa, California, all the way to literally to Washington, D.C. itself, and everywhere in between. So during one of those trips, I would imagine, this woman here is, her name is Joan Lucinda Webster, and she was the daughter of two former CIA agents. And once you're a member of that organization, there's really no former about it. So I don't know if he met Joan through them, or if he met her, as he states, which was in the library of Harvard. But she was a graduate student at Harvard, I think an architectural student. And according to him, on his website that he shares daily, that I've shared with you before, he supposedly was in a relationship with Joan, and everything I guess was going great. Joan seemed like she was a really good catch. I mean, she seems like super intelligent, attractive, and much younger than Dick. So in a lot of ways, he was, I think, reaching beyond his grasp. I mean, just look at the difference. This looks like a high society woman, and this looks like a serial killer, basically. No offense, but oh, by the way, the person who did who described the drawing said the hair is a little it's more curly than it was supposed to be. But other than that, whoever did this diagram of Dick did a pretty good job, because he had this like 1,000-mile stare that he would look at you. If he wanted to look at you like he was just looking through you, long story short, he could really send a message just in one little stare. But this is Joan This is Joan, and she was 25 years old, and she made the mistake of dating this man, who at the time was around close to 40 years old. But that's the man who raised me, Dick Nolette, and that's the person that was last seen with Joan Lucinda Webster. Let's see. So I think that, and by the way, before I forget to mention it, things went horribly wrong before too long with Joan, and she disappeared. She disappeared around Thanksgiving time of, I think it was 1981, and her body was not found until 1990, I believe, until April 18th of 1990. But let's see. In that year, this cipher was sent to the Vallejo Times Herald, and in this cipher, it took me months to solve. But basically, there's several female victims and several male victims, and also Leonard Paradiso is mentioned in here, who was incorrectly convicted of the murder of a related woman. Her murder was tied to Maria Ian Uzi was she was murdered with a scarf, and the murderer left the scarf tied around her neck, and that happened close to where I think it was the Boston area, to tell you the truth. It was where they did the trial for Leonard Paradiso. But long story short, the women mentioned in here include Donna Lass, who was probably the first woman that the man who raised me cannibalized. He abducted her from a casino in Lake Tahoe and took her somewhere in Plumas County, probably where we used to go camping in the mountains up there, but probably tortured her for weeks and then murdered her and ended up eating her, according to things that he's alluded to. But one of the other reasons I want to mention this is Joan is mentioned repeatedly in this, and all of this ties in specifically to Joan Webster, and because Joan Webster's body was found on the 18th of April of 1990, it was the same date that this stamp was released, and this stamp is a Marianne Moore stamp, a famous poet, American poetess. Her stamp was released on the April 18th of 1990, on the same day that Joan's remains were found. She had been found in a really remote part of Massachussetts, and somebody had repeatedly gone out there and visited her grave, and they had repeatedly stacked new wood upon her grave, and the only way they found her grave was I guess it was a really rainy period, and her skull washed out into one of the what do you call it, the drainways or traps or whatever. So Joan is repeatedly mentioned in here. This was sent on the 25th of September of 1990, and it's a 25-cent stamp. And those two things tie into the age that Joan was at the time of her murder, which was 25 years old. Also, this right here represents, well, in a way it represents, by the way, this is the first death threat that Dick made to me. I was supposed to be murdered in the fall of 1991. And in actuality, the man who raised me and another family member, they set my best friend up. His name was Kelly Marshall Heine. They murdered him in the house in Napa, the family home in Napa, on Heather Lane, by the way. And anyhow, they later, with the help of one of their local Napa police officer friends, they deposited his body behind a 7-Eleven in the alley there, and made the whole story up that he had committed suicide, and none of it was a fact. And I only found that out when I solved the Scorpion cipher. But long story short, this is the first order directive that states that I would be murdered in the fall of 1991. And thankfully, at that time, Dick and I were getting along. Ironically, we were delivering Chronicle newspapers for the San Francisco Chronicle from one end of Napa to the other in the morning hours. He would drive the little Datsun diesel pickup, and I would throw them as we went along. We made a really good team for a few months there, but crazy I'm talking about that when I'm talking about all of this horrific stuff too. I didn't know about any of this, guys. I didn't know about any of this until the last 4 years, which is crazy. And now I'm 55 years old. But this right here is supposed to represent myself. I used to wear an eye patch for an eye problem when I was a little kid. That's a ball gag. This is a victim being tortured. But what this little drawing began as is on the original postcard. This is the United States. Underneath this is originally it's just a map of the United States. Dick has drawn eyeballs on it with a little patch here and with a ball gag. And what he's saying is that he's tortured victims, child victims, from one end of the country to the other, from top to bottom of the whole country. He's done the worst, and he's got away with it. And so, in a way, this represents me, but it also represents victims like Adam Walsh. You can see Florida would be down here where the ball gag is. So in the Scorpion cipher, many child victims are listed. It's almost all child victims, and Adam Walsh is one of them, and John Benet Ramsey is another one, and so is Kevin Collins. Kevin Collins was, according to the Scorpion cipher, Kevin Collins was held in a pain pod, which may have been even inside between levels of the house on Heather Lane, which I don't know how they would have done that without me ever seeing it. But they said for 8 years and 8 months, somewhere on the property there was what they call a pain pod, and that was where Kevin Collins was held as prisoner for, once again, 8 years and 8 months. But yeah, so whenever I look at this cipher, I have a lot of survivor's guilt, because this was supposed to mark the 1 year announcement of my murder. This was September of 1990. By October of 1991, they had planned to murder me, and in my place, my best friend Kelly Heine was tricked into. Well, he was going through some stuff, and I imagine they pretended like they wanted to help him, but all of it was a ruse. And according to the Scorpion cipher, they tortured him, they raped him, and they murdered him at the house in Napa, the house that I grew up in on Heather Lane. So, let's see. So before I forget to mention it, this is the stamp. This is the 25-cent stamp that's on the upper right of the celebrity cipher, and that is like the one of the links that holds everything together with Joan Webster. The reason two reasons he put this stamp on the celebrity cipher was because the 25 is the age that Joan was at her time of death. But more than anything, it was because the release date of this stamp coincided exactly with the day that Joan Webster's remains were finally found in Massachussetts on 18th of April of 1990. Furthermore, this poet, Joan Webster, and Dick's first wife, all of them heralded from the same general area, the area of New Jersey, right around Hackensack, New Jersey, within 30 or 35 miles. all of them came from the same little area. So you can see how all of this ties together. And also he mailed it on the 25th of September of 1990. Excuse me. So all of the numbers, once again, I'm trying to show how important the numbers are and how the numbers correspond to the place, time, location, and age of his victims. So let's see. And once again, this is beautiful. Beautiful Joan Webster. She looked like a little angel, super intelligent. I don't know. Nobody's an angel, but she definitely looked like a very intelligent, high society woman for sure. And she made a huge mistake in dating Dick, that's for sure. But this is the police sketch of the last man that was seen at the airport with Joan, and that is the man who raised me. That's Dick Nolette, Richard Nolette Sr. But let's see. So in this presentation tonight, I'm touching a lot of things, on a lot of different things, and not really finishing up on some of them. But one of my future presentations will include the whole concept of buried in nature as it applies to Nancy Guthrie, but also to the Burger Chef cipher and to the lifelong quote-unquote achievements of Dick Nolette. And he's trying to tell a story as far as his life of murder and crime, and he's trying to tell it through the cipher. However, it's most people won't understand the cipher, and let alone understand the life of a sadistic serial killer, because most people don't have that operating hardware. Thankfully, most people are born with empathy and compassion and the things that make people, well, more quote unquote human. You know, this diagram is hopefully you can see it. This diagram is what I've been able to put together as far as the buried in nature, and it'll be a part of my presentation coming up in the next week or two. Hopefully that presentation will be a lot more focused than this one tonight. But what I want to point out here is just some of the basics, and also compare it to well, what it's supposed to be compared to, which is the novel. There's a novel called Orlando. Basically, it describes the character Orlando, who lives for hundreds of years and writes a book called I guess it's a book of poetry called the Oak. And I think that Dick considers all of his crimes and his whole life of crime to be a great tale of epic proportions, and something that very few people get the opportunity to participate in and have that kind of undertaking, which I guess in a way is true if you want to take and view things through the eye of a sadist. It's very few people in the whole existence of the world have been able to murder as many people and torture as many people as he has and never face any consequences. But in this, I'll just basically describe some of it, but I'm not going to get into any kind of detail today. This diagram, this hourglass shape at the bottom, it spells out the word Alona, beginning with the A in the lower right corner. And the lower numbers correspond with the murder date of Nancy Guthrie, by the way, this year, which is 2/1 or February 1st. The whole diagram spells the word Alona, and it's an hourglass, but it also forms other shapes, and especially when we bring other things in. Joan Webster's remains were found on 4/18 of 1990. And the word net here traces, it's repeated 3 times. It's over here, and it's up on this line. This line represents the murder of Joan Webster, which occurred, I believe it was, I don't know, it was either 1980 or 1981. I think it was 1981. But this represents her murder, and it spells out some insulting messages about Joan Webster. And basically, he has linked these together, which form different shapes. If in one way it forms a Z, which is his signature, but in the other way it forms the letters J and L, which is Joan Lucinda. And then finally, because it comes in here on these shapes, it also forms an off-center W. So taken all together, it's Joan Lucinda Webster. And once again, at these 4 positions on the corners, we have the words hacksack. Joan was found disposed in a black plastic bag. So the word hacksack not only applies to her, but applies to many different victims. And it not only, what I meant to say is it not only applies to Nancy Guthrie, but applies to many different women that he has done this to over the decades, including Joan Webster herself. But in this cipher, he has given Joan Webster like supreme importance, and all of these shapes, which probably represent also some sort of pentagram. You have to remember, one of their beliefs is called the Order of 9 Angles, and I believe that has to do with the angles of a pentagram. And all of this probably creates a pentagram over the memory of Joan Lucinda Webster. And it also ties into the symbol that represents the oak tree, which is once again the word Alona, the Hebrew word for Alona. And there's other words hidden down here, which basically mean forever and resurrection. We won't get into those today, but I think of all of the murders that Dick ever committed, the one that he may actually have some regret. I don't know. Maybe I'm overstepping, and maybe he doesn't even regret that. But according to a lot of things I've seen him write on his website, I shared that website where he writes daily. It seems like he may hold some sincere regret over murdering his former girlfriend, Joan Webster of New Jersey. And I think that's one of the reasons that he's given her such a high standing in this cipher. Like, in a way, maybe he wishes that he could have done things differently, or not had such a violent reaction to feeling like he was being abandoned. But in the end, I didn't include a picture on this. I probably won't in the future presentation because it's so graphic, but you guys can look it up online. It's very obvious that he had bound Joan and tortured her and likely raped her, but he also, when it came down to it, he murdered her with what he had on hand, and apparently he didn't have a weapon, and he used a brick, is what I'm trying to say. If you look at the photos online of how they found her, her skull has a very distinct hole and perforation in it. It's the very shape of a brick, and so he murdered this incredibly intelligent woman with a brick. And one of the reasons I'm including this in the presentation today, believe it or not, guys, is I watch a lot of YouTube, and the other day there was some person explaining different thought patterns and came up with the idea of asking the question, how many different things can you do with a brick? And they went everywhere along the gamut, from using it as an anchor or a paperweight, or on and on and on, and different kinds of tools. And my mind kept returning to the picture of Joan Webster's skull with a brick-shaped hole in the whole side of it. And I don't know. It's hard to have compassion for this man, considering all the lives that he has ruined and the horrific things that he has done, including to people that he claimed to quote unquote love. Anyhow, so this whole thing right here goes along with the whole idea of oak. And one thing I want to share before we completely wrap it up today, guys, is let's see, where did the notes go? Let's see. I'm looking for my notes, and they're right there under the sorry guys. Sometimes I'm more organized than I expect myself, and most of the time I'm not organized at all. But believe it or not, guys, the man who raised me is an incredibly intelligent man, and very well spoken verbally, but also an incredible writer. And he has read a lot of the best literature in the world for many decades. And one of his favorite books is this book by Virginia Woolf called Orlando. And this book here holds a lot of the secrets as far as the ransom note for Nancy Guthrie and the phrase that Nancy has been buried with nature or in nature. Anyhow, it's the 85th anniversary this year of, by the way, before I forget to mention, Joan was also likely very interested in literature and appreciated literature. I know she liked plays and things like that, so I imagine she was also a fan of literature, and maybe that's one of the areas where Dick and Joan found mutual interest together. And I'm sure he impressed her as far as his knowledge of literature. But and once again, that's Joan right there. And that's a sketch of Dick. But what I'm trying to say is the anniversary. Joan's body was found on the 18th of April of 1990, and the 85 years ago, the body of Virginia Woolf was finally pulled from the river. Weeks before, she had loaded up her jacket and her pants with heavy rocks and had walked into the river behind her house. And so for weeks her body was missing, but finally on the same day that Joan Webster's body was found, on the 18th of April, 85 years ago, they were able to recover. Some children found the body of the writer Virginia Woolf. So what I'm trying to say is all of this is tied together, and one of the ways that it's tied together is through this book, Orlando, and it's tied together through the word oak and oak tree. And believe it or not, this is the checkout list for the actual book at Riverside Community College down in Southern California. And Riverside College, or Riverside, the general area, within miles is where the oldest oak tree on the West Coast is located, and one of the oldest colonies of a special kind of oak tree that it clones itself is also found there. And it just, on the 12th of this year, it just got protected status, but it's basically 13 or 14,000 years old. That little clump of, that's like miniature oak trees. But a little further down the road on an Indian reservation, also in the same area, is the largest and oldest oak tree on the West Coast. I forget the name of it, but so there's a lot of things that tie into the oak tree. But for the purposes of this presentation, what you need to know is that Dick and his extended family member were in that area. Dick was a student at Riverside Community College, and he murdered Sherry Jo Bates in days before, or on the eve of Halloween of 1966, in the first year of the Church of Satan. He murdered the former cheerleader, Sherry Jo Bates, after luring her to, he pretended like he was helping her fix her car and then carry her books, and then he led her to a dark place where he murdered her. But basically, this is the checkout list for the book I just showed you, Orlando, by Virginia Woolf. And as you can see to the left side here, March 18th of 66, and also May 12th of 1972. These are both dates that Dick had checked out this book. May 12th is Dick's birthday, and you have to understand how the number 6 correlates to all of these numbers. First, the March 18th of 66, 18 breaks down into three sixes, which is another way of representing the number 666. So you have essentially 3 sixes, and then the year 1966, it was checked out for about 6 weeks here, from the 18th. Well, it's hard to tell right here. It may have been 6 years, 6 years and 6 weeks, to tell you the truth, because it goes from 66 to 1972 right there. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of 666s right there, and this book ties into the Burger Chef cipher, believe it or not, and the message is hidden in the Burger Chef cipher. I found all of this online, and once again, it's just, there's proof. It goes back to Riverside Junior College, and once again, the dates, I think you could see them better on the other page. But May 12th is his birth date. So it was checked. There it is again. So, and let's see. I'm just going to end with the I could do a lot better job of explaining this, guys. I'm just fading right now, and I'm gonna explain a couple of quotes here. Let's see, 1, 2. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So at the end of the book, the writer, who, by the way, turns from being a man to a woman overnight in the book, a lot like the letter writer from the Nancy Guthrie so-called ransom notes. They turn from having a so-called male voice to a female voice. The same thing happens in the book Orlando, and a lot of it is tied to being buried in nature, whether it be the author herself, who buried herself in nature by doing a water burial when she committed suicide and walked into the river near her house with stones in her clothing. Whether it be that, or whether it be the character Orlando, who attempts to bury his book in nature at the foot of an oak tree at the end of the novel. And let's see. I'll read 2 different quotes here, and then I'll let everybody go. Everybody can go to lunch. So the first quote I'm going to read is about the author trying to bury their book at at the foot of the oak tree at the end of the novel. So here I go. I'm going to begin reading this. So she let her book lie unburied and disheveled on the ground, and watched the vast view, varied like an ocean floor this evening, with the sun lightening it and the shadows darkening it. There was a village with a church tower among elm trees, a gray domed manor house in a park, a spark of light burning on some glass house, a farmyard with yellow corn stacks. The fields were marked with black tree clumps, and beyond the fields stretched long woodlands, and there was the gleam of a river and then hills again. In the far distance, Snowdon's crags broke white among the clouds. She saw the far Scottish hills and the wild tides that swirl about the Hebrides. She listened for the sound of gun firing out at sea. No, only the wind blew. There was no war today. Drake had gone, Nelson had gone, and there, she thought, letting her eyes, which had been looking at these far distances, drop once more to the land beneath her, was my land at once. That castle between the downs was mine, and all that moor running almost to the sea was mine. Here the landscape, it must have been some trick of the fading light, shook itself, heaped itself, let all this encumbrance of houses, castles, and woods slide off its tent-shaped sides. The bare mountains of Turkey were before her. It was blazing noon. She looked straight at the baked hillside. Goats cropped the sandy tufts at her feet. An eagle soared above. The raucous voice of old Rustum the gypsy croaked in her ears. Quote, "What is your antiquity and your race and your possessions compared with this? What do you need? What do you need with 400 bedrooms and silver lids on all your dishes and housemaids dusting?" At this moment, some church clock chimed in the valley. The tent-like landscape collapsed and fell. The present showered down upon her head once more, but now that the light was fading gentlier than before, calling into view nothing detailed, nothing small, but only misty fields, cottages with lamps in them, the slumbering bulk of a wood, and a fan-shaped light pushing the darkness before it along some lane. Whether it had struck 9, 10, or 11, she could not say. Night had come, night that she loved of all times, night in which the reflections in the dark pool of the mind shine more clearly than by day. It was not necessary to faint now in order to look deep into the darkness where things shape themselves, and to see in the pool of the mind now Shakespeare, now a girl in Russian trousers, now a toy boat on the Serpentine, and then the Atlantic itself, where it storms in great waves past Cape Horn. She looked into the darkness. There was her husband's brig, rising to the top of the wave. Up it went, and up and up. The white arc of 1,000 deaths rose before it. Oh rash, oh ridiculous man, always sailing so uselessly round Cape Horn in the teeth of a gale. But the brig was through the arc and out on the other side. It was safe at last. So that was one line. That was one passage where she was going to bury the character of Orlando, was going to bury her lifelong book, her work of art, which compares to the Zodiac's 85 years of murder. He compares his life as being a masterpiece and artwork of on the sinister side of things of life, and something that nobody would probably ever understand, which very few people can understand the Cipher, let alone a life of sadism and murder, But in this Cipher, that's what he's comparing it to, is his life, his secret life is being compared to the lifelong work of the main character in the book Orlando, which is called, the book itself is called The Oak Tree, or the Oak. And that's why Dick has hidden the oak. That's one of the reasons he's hidden the oak in the bottom of the Burger Chef Cipher. So one last line that I'm going to end with has a lot to do with the word net, and it's one of the main reasons that the word net has been repeatedly included in here. It's at least 3 times, one here, and one here, which once again they all connect up to his relationship with Joan Webster, and trying to make sense of that and understand the quandary that he put himself in between killing the one thing that he supposedly adored so much, but not being able to have control of his emotions, his abandonment triggers as far as his violence and his tendencies to murder, I guess is, I'm not putting it into great words, but you get what I'm saying. So once again, the oak tree is mentioned in the word Alona here, which is also it's been put specifically in this shape, which is an hourglass shape, but it's also an X shape. So it indicates the passage of time for his victims, but also for himself. He's in his 85th year now. So it's an hourglass, but it's also the shape of an X, which is all of the victims. It represents each and every one of the victims that he and his family have quote unquote collected over the decades. And once again, the word at the positions net here, and net here, it forms various letters, whether it be his signature Z for Zodiac, or angular letters J and L, and then even in W for Joan Lucinda Webster, who I guess was one of the most had the most profound effect upon his entire life, and as did his murder of her, which I tend to think that of all of the murders he's committed, he may possibly have regrets over his murder of his former girlfriend, Joan Lucinda Webster. I'm going to read one more passage, and then we're going to wrap this up, guys. All right. This is from the end of the novel Orlando, and it has to do with the words nets in the Burger Chef Cipher, but also with the final deposition place and method of Miss Nancy Guthrie of Tucson, Arizona, and also with the one of the lines from the one of the so-called ransom notes, or the notes from the killers, which read that Nancy had been buried with nature, or buried in nature. All right, here goes the quote, guys. He sat at Twitchett's table, she mused, quote, with a dirty ruff on. Was it old Mr. Baker come to measure the timber, or was it SH-P-RE? Question mark. And then in parentheses, for when we speak names we deeply reverence to ourselves, we never speak them whole. She glazed for 10 minutes ahead of her, letting the car come almost to a standstill. Quote, haunted, she cried, suddenly pressing the accelerator. Haunted. Ever since I was a child, there flies the wild goose. It flies past the window out to sea. Up I jumped. She gripped the steering wheel tighter and stretched after it. But the goose flies too fast. I've seen it here, there, England, Persia, Italy. Always it flies fast out to sea, and always I fling after it words like nets. Here she flung her hand out. which shrivel as I've seen nets shrivel, drawn on deck with only seaweed in them. And sometimes there's an inch of silver, 6 words in the bottom of the net, but never the great fish who lives in the coral groves. Here she bent her head, pondering deeply, and it was at this moment, when she had ceased to call Orlando and was deep in thoughts of something else, that Orlando, whom she had called, came out of its own accord and was proved by the change that now came over her. She had passed through the lodge gates and was entering the park. So the most important thing here are the lines having to do with the net and the wild goose chase. It all describes, basically it describes both the position of the writer trying to capture the uncapturable in words, which is bigger concepts of life, like the ideas of suffering or being in love or any of the bigger concepts. Even when the best of the best writers try to put it into words, it always still somehow falls short. So that's what they're trying to describe, or that's what Virginia Woolf is trying to describe here, is even the greatest writers, if they get a line of 6 words that just really resonate with the human experience, that's about the best that they can hope for. And I imagine that Dick was trying to embody the same sort of message here in the Burger Chef Cipher, because it's almost impossible for somebody who's a sexual sadist and a psychopath and has spent their life delighting in fooling people and in hurting people and murdering people. How do you convey that? How do you convey that to quote unquote normal people? I would imagine it's damn near impossible, is what I'm trying to say. And here I'm trying to be the intermediary and try to explain all of these hidden messages in here, and how all of this is part of an enormous project that was planned all the way back to the 1960s, and has encompassed Dick's whole life, is what I'm trying to say. And here in the Burger Chef Cipher, he has hidden several passages and important descriptives, whether it be the moon or the oak tree or the city, the ancient city of Rose City in the Middle East. I think it's in Jordan. He's hidden many clues and made many allusions that he's trying to explain that there's, according to him, there's a much greater purpose to all of the things that he has done. And I imagine in his mind, he's trying to create a beautiful afterlife in the same way that, in a similar but opposite way that somebody from the Christian faith might think of it. Like, I don't know. I think a lot of this has to do with what do you call it? The word paradise. Like, he used to always spell the word paradise, Paradice. And anyhow, it has to do with the ideas that his satanic order have about the afterlife, and about ever since the 1960s, he was mentioning collecting slaves for his afterlife. That's a quote from him. So I imagine all of this is tied in different ways to the book Orlando, which is by Virginia Woolf, but none more so than the corresponding dates. Once again, 85 years ago this year, on April 18th of that year, Virginia Woolf's body was plucked from the river where she had walked in and ended her own life. And like I said, she weighted herself down with stones. Well, many years later, in the spring of 1990, on April 18th of 1990, eventually, some 9 years after she was murdered by Dick, Joan Lucinda Webster's body was finally found in a really remote part of Massachusetts. So what I'm trying to say is he's connected all these dates, and all of these dates are connected in the cipher through shapes, probably including 9 angles, which may be in the form of a pentagram, which also corresponds with Joan Lucinda Webster and probably other victims. But what I'm saying is, whether it be through shapes or numbers or dates or anniversaries, all of these are connected, and that's a part of his quote-unquote religion, and that's evident in the way that all of these alignments have been meticulously planned out. In fact, all the way going back to at least the 1960s. So I think with that in mind, I sorry if I rambled all over the place today, guys, but I've been trying to explain many different topics here, and I'd like to get further into this topic at a later date and see if I can do a much better job of explaining the connections to Virginia Woolf's novel Orlando and the oak tree, which is the main character Orlando. That's his lifelong well, his/her, because it changes from a man to a woman. But that's the writer's, that's her main project that goes for hundreds of years. She lives a life that is 300 or 400 years she lives basically the life of an oak tree. She lives hundreds and hundreds of years is her lifespan. But for that whole time, she's working on her novel or her life work of poetry, which is, once again, it's called the oak, and all of this connects. And once again, it specifically connects through that specific passage about the nets, and I'll just repeat that one line. It's talking about the wild goose, like the wild goose chase, and it says, so I'll just read the whole passage. "Haunted," she cried, suddenly pressing the accelerator. "Haunted. Ever since I was a child. There flies the wild goose. It flies past the window, out to sea. Up I jumped." She gripped the steering wheel tighter and stretched after it. "But the goose flies too fast. I've seen it. Here, there, England, Persia, Italy. Always it flies fast out to sea, and always I fling after it words like nets." Here she flung her hand out, which shrivel, and I've seen nets shrivel drawn on deck with only seaweed in them, and sometimes there's an inch of silver, 6 words in the bottom of the net, but never the great fish who lives in the coral groves. Here she bent her head, pondering deeply. So once again, she's just saying that as even the greatest writer, if she can put together six words that touch the chords of the human experience, that she has done something incredible. But it's very, very fleeting, and basically it's impossible to convey the human experience through the art of writing in a complete way where somebody can actually completely get it through somebody else's words. So hopefully I'm able to hopefully get what I'm saying. I'll try it another time, but thank you guys. That's going to be the end of it. Thank you for everybody taking a couple hours to watch this. I appreciate it, and hopefully you've learned a little more about all the mysteries of my family of origin, and I just want to leave a trail behind me that shares a lot of these truths, just in case anything happens to me. But please keep me in your prayers, and please keep following the show and keep along with the whole journey. And I appreciate all you guys. The few of you that have been in my corner are amazing, and thank you for being there. All right, have a good day.